Girl, finish, go. You will leave.
Good morning, church. I'll be reading 1 Kings chapter 15, starting at verse 1. In the 18th year of the reign of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijah, king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother's name was Micaiah, daughter of Abijah. He committed all the sins his fathers had done before him. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David, his forefather, had been. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him lamp in Jerusalem by raising a son to succeed him by making Jerusalem strong. For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commandments in the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. There was war between Abijah and Jeroboam throughout Abijah's lifetime. As for the other events of Abijah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of annals of the kings of Judah? There was wars between Abijah and Jeroboam, and Abijah rested with and was buried in the city of David. And Abijah, the son succeeded him as king. In the 20th year of Jeroboam's king of Israel, Abijah became king with Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 41 years. His grandmother's name was Micaiah, daughter of Abijah. Abijah did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as his father David had done. He expelled the male shrine prostitutes from the land and got rid of all the idols his ancestors had made. He even disposed his grandmother's Micaiah from her position as queen mother, because she had made a repulsive image of the worship of Asherah. Abijah cut down and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Although he did not remove the high places, Abijah's heart was fully committed to the Lord all his life. He brought into the temple of the Lord the silver and gold and the article that his father had dedicated. There was war between Abijah and Baasha, king of Israel, throughout their reign. Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and forfeited Rahab to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territories of Abijah, king of Judah. Abijah then took all the silver and gold that was left in the treasure of the Lord temple and of his own palace. He entrusted it to his officials and sent them to Ben-Hadad, son of Jeroboam, the son of Zion, the king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus. Let there be treaty between me and you, he said, as there was between my father and your father. See, I am sending you a gift of silver and gold. And I break your treaty with Bahash, king of Israel. So he will withdraw from me. Ben-Hadad agreed to King Ashas and sent the commanders of his forces against the town of Israel. He conquered Lejon, Daniel, Abel, Beth, Makala, and all Kinnereth, in addition to Naphtali. When Bahash heard this, he stopped building Ramah and withdrew to Tirzah. Then King Asa issued an order to all Judah. No one was exempt, and they carried away from Ramada the stones and timber Baasha had been using there. With them, King Asa built up Geba and Benjamin, and also Misfit. As for all the other events of Asa reigned, all his achievements, all he did in the cities he built, are they not written in the books of the annals and the king of Judah? In his old age, however, his feet became deceased, and Asa rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of his father David. And Jehoshaphat, his son, succeeded him as king. Nabad, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in the second year of Asa's king of Judah. And he reigned over Israel 2 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the ways of his father and committing the same sins his father had caused Israel to commit. Baasha, son of Ahab, from the tribe of Issachar, plotted against him, and he struck him down at Gibbethon, a Philistine town, while Nabad and all Israel were besieging it. Baasha killed Nabad in the third year of Asa's king of Judah, and succeeded him as king. As soon as he began to reign, he killed Jeroboam's whole family. He did not leave Jeroboam anyone that breathed, but destroyed them all, according to the word of the Lord, given through his servant Abijah the Solomite. This happened because of the sins Jeroboam had committed and had caused Israel to commit, and because he arose the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel. As for the other events, Nabad reigned, and all he did, are they not written in the book of annals of the king of Israel? There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, throughout the reign. In the third year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, son of Ahab, became king of Israel in Tirzah, and he reigned 24 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the ways of Jeroboam, and committed the same sin Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. Thank you. May the Lord have a blessing to hearers and doers of His holy word.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
All right, so the next couple of weeks, we have a lot to unpack. You are definitely going to have to do your own personal study, so I encourage you to do so. For those of you who have young children in the home, whether if you're parents or grandparents, this section of the Old Testament would be a great source material for your personal Bible studies and your family Bible studies. They may grab, especially if you have young people in the home that are in elementary, middle school, all the way up to high school, the stories that are in First Kings and that are in Second Chronicles may be some point of interest to them, especially with the type of entertainment that is out now with a lot of the fiction or nonfiction movies and TV series that are looking at time periods of monarchies, of kings and queens and wars and things like that. This is the type of political structure, that we're looking at. So again, those of you who have maybe not babies, but if you have elementary, middle school, all the way up to high school, whether you are a parent or a grandparent, I would encourage you to use this First Kings as some source material for your family Bible studies that will help you read through this. This particular lesson 8 has a ton of Bible verses. There's no way we'll be able to read them every week. This chapter is also massive. If you look in the printouts in the back, there's 52 total questions here. So we'll do our best to go through as much as we can. But again, we don't want to set false expectations. Some of this will be skimming through, so it'll be up to you to dive in deeper. Another way to get through this quickly is to do the audio book. If you treat it like any form of media that you listen to, whether going to work, coming back from work, working out, daytime, evening time, you'll notice that the reader can read through pretty quickly. And if you have a particular Bible app, they usually read it with emphasis, and it sounds more of like listening to books being read than just maybe reading it yourself. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is it's going to be hard to grab the contents of these questions each Sunday morning without reading the material. Some of the lessons you can skip reading the material and still grab the essence, but this lesson is so heavy with history. If you don't read the actual material, you'll be lost. Okay, now we're looking at, last week we went back to we went back to Rehoboam. And remember, I was telling you we had already looked at Rehoboam. So you may have been like, hey, we looked at this. What's the big deal? But that was when we were looking at Jeroboam from the Israelite standpoint. Now we're looking at the Judah standpoint. Now, remember, Judah broke up and went with the house of David. The rest of the tribes went with Jeroboam, right? Rehoboam was the son from Solomon's side. He's over Judah. When we pick up here with what Brother Kumar was reading, he already passed away. Now we're going to look at this lesson 8 for the next several weeks, Judah's side. Now, Israel is bigger than Judah. They have more physical resources in terms of troops and things like that. But God is preserving both, obviously. But God had already made a promise to David that his descendants will reign. This is how you have 2 kingdoms, and his descendants are going to reign on the Judah side. All right. Okay, so always keep in mind, and this is more so for the friends and families that are joining us online each and every week. Always keep in mind that when you look at Chronicles is a parallel to Kings. So sometimes it's verbatim, word for word. Sometimes it gives you a little bit more deep dive. So when we come to class for the next couple of weeks, just keep your finger on 1 Kings chapter 15, and then also keep your finger on 2 Chronicles 13, because we'll be doing a little bit back and forth from here to there. Now, I want to look at Chronicles point for this first, if you don't mind. Our first question is, what kind of king was Abijah? What kind of king was Abijah? And why did God not remove him from the throne? If you look at this 1 Kings chapter 15, which we already just read, you'll see that he, in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, right? So now we got to keep in mind how much time have went by. And if you miss some of these other classes, you're going to want to recap, because Jeroboam was reigning havoc on the Israelite side, right? The nation of Israel side. So 18 years into that reigning of havoc, right? That's a long time. Now we have this gentleman come up. His grandmother, his mother's name was Maacah. She was the granddaughter of Absalom. Now, even if you're just the most basic Bible student, you should remember that Absalom's dad is who? Right? Who is his father? Right? So, like, therefore, remember I told you that David's family is still reigning. It's just that they got a little tiny kingdom, right? David's major son in terms of reigning is Solomon, then it just keeps going on from there, right? So this shouldn't be too foreign to us, right? Now, the good thing to flag about Abijah is that he was a part of this lineage. The bad thing to flag about him is verse 3 of 1 Kings 15. He walked in all the sins of his father, right? So that's the bad part. Meaning what? When you see that, and again, this is more to our friends and family that are joining us online. Every time First and Kings, Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles uses that specific phrase, what sin is it talking about, right? It's not necessarily talking about, so many physical sins that we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God according to the New Testament. But what is it talking about in terms of spiritual sin when it says that phrase? And again, that's less for us, it's more for those that are watching online. So we're just helping them. What is that phrase talking about? What type of sin, right? The number one first commandment they're breaking. That's what he's saying. So what is this saying in verse 3? What did Abijah do without First Kings even telling us verbatim? What do we know as Bible students by the time we get to this chapter when it says that? We already know what kind of sin Abijah was doing. Anybody want to fill us in? What type of spiritual sin was he doing? Don't think physical sin. This is the same exact sin that everyone was doing beforehand in terms of the kings. It's the sin that Jeroboam and his side in Israel is doing, and it breaks the first commandment and the greatest commandment. Remember, the person asked Jesus about the greatest commandment, right? And the first commandment are very, very similar. So what is this sin that they're breaking? They're worshiping other gods. Every time you see that phrase throughout First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, and Second Chronicles, that's what it's alluding to, right? So when we go to the New Testament and the person asked Jesus, what's the greatest command? And Jesus said to love your God with all your heart, mind, body, soul, and spirit. And the first commandment is not to have any other gods before God himself. You can already surmise the rest of the vibe of the people if the first commandment is broke, right? I mean, that's just logical, right? If you break the first commandment, what's the likelihood you keeping the other 9, right? Like very low. See, so therefore, if you already not keeping the first commandment, it's already implied to us as the reader, without having to have everything they're doing written down as a historical reference, that you're breaking these other commandments, right? As a parallel to us in terms of application, right? And this is encouragement for you and your family, especially if you are doing these family Bible studies with this chapter in Second Chronicles chapter 13. Remember when I was saying with elementary school, middle school, or high school students in the home. The parallel to this is very specific. If Jesus said the greatest commandment is that, right, which is fearing God and loving God with all that you have, internally and externally, all aspects of yourself, right? Your mind, body, and soul. And if all the other laws, he said, was hung on that, just foundation, right? Like you build your house on a foundation. If the foundation cracked, the likelihood that the house will stay upright is low, correct? When you make the parallel to us under the new covenant, this is why it's important for young people. You can also use Ecclesiastes to support this when you're talking to them, because Ecclesiastes chapter 12, Solomon said, remember God when? In your youth, right? So then they'll say, okay, I see where you're going with this. God. The point is, if you break that command, we already said, oh, we can guess if there's 9 other commands. If we just look at the 10, what's the likelihood they're keeping the other 9? We all said low. You have to let young people know that if you don't start off with some foundational respect, fear, and love for God, all these other things between Genesis and Revelation will mean nothing, right? Because if you don't set forth some sort of foundation of your respect level, everything else will break. The reason why this is a good family study is it's also the main concept that you should be using in terms of discipline, because when they're under elementary school, you are so much bigger than them. The fear of God will have them follow your instructions. The problem, though, is as they get older, they're going to start to look at you physically different. Therefore, you will not strike fear into them. Get my point? It's not about having a fear that your parent will harm you. The point is respect. See, the point is, as you go into middle school and into high school, it's not about not doing something anymore because you fear your parent could physically dominate you, right? It's more so of not doing it because of the respect you have for your parents. That's usually where the house diverges, right? And the young people go out the house and they come back in house with some teaching from school and their friends that didn't come from inside the house. So this is also a section of scripture to use to help instill general discipline principles. See, it's not about not doing something because my fear is that the police will beat me up or shoot me or kill me, right? The point is you want to create society with functioning law-abiding citizens where I would have respect for the law enough to not break it. See what we're saying? It's better to instill that in young people at a young age. Because if they don't have respect for you, then they won't have respect for the teacher, then they won't have respect for the law, and they definitely won't have respect for God. See, Christian household and other people's household operate different. I don't know what other people's household do to instill that in their children. But just the strong arm of the law or just the iron fist is not enough. See, some people treat their house like that. That's only going to last but so much time. Once the child have no longer a physical fear of you, that yelling and screaming not going to do nothing but raise your own blood pressure. See? So that's not a sustainable way of discipline. That's why it's not a good idea. And this is where people say, oh, okay, you know, I want to do whatever I want to do. Be a parent however you want to be a parent. Don't make you a good parent. Someone just recently had this conversation. A lot of people have parents. Our parents have children. Just because you have a child don't make you a good father, a good mother. Just because you got a wedding ring don't make you a good husband or a good wife. We talking about family structure. So you shouldn't be doing something in your family that's not sustainable. So if we already know yelling and screaming is not sustainable, put aside love and all these other things from New Testament that we can say why that's wrong. We're just talking about sustainability. It's probably not a good idea to start parenting that way. We should find some better tactics. This is sustainable because regardless of you and your child's physical stature, even if you 100 years old, right? 100 years old, your child gonna look at you like, well, okay, I mean, no offense, mom or dad, I have no fear at 100 that you're gonna, you know, do anything physically to me. I mean, you barely could yell 100 years. I mean, what's kind of cracking? But they still respect you as if you were 21 years old parent. See? So the respect is sustainable. The yelling and screaming is not sustainable. See? Jesus's point to that person was the same. The respect has to be sustainable to God all throughout all the laws, all the rules. That way, when you find some laws or rules that you don't necessarily agree with as much as others, you still don't break them because of the respect you have, which is why it's the first and the greatest command. See, same with parenting. You have to tell your kids, especially when they get to high school, you have to have enough respect for me that even when I'm not around and you start to interact with new aspects of life, freedoms that other people's household have that you don't, you have enough respect for me to not do them because of the respect you have for me. That's parenting. And when I was talking to someone, I was asking, do you parent that way? I didn't say nothing about hitting. I didn't say nothing about yelling, screaming, because they were telling me about vices. And my point, and they wanted to know how I felt about a vice. And I was saying, no, you should be worried about how your child interacts with a vice. See, because they wanted me to argue with them about vices because they knew I went to church, but I'm not a parent. So I was more wondering about, do you let your kid do the same vice you want me to argue about? No. Of course, I asked what? Why not? Well, it's bad for them. It's not bad for you. See how that went? So therefore, this type of Bible study is perfect for family structure because it's more on respect. People who aren't raised this way, this is going to be foreign. But if you can get a child to be amongst friends and not partake of drugs because of the respect they have for you as a parent, that's a win, because that's almost impossible to do because you're not around, correct? And there's nothing to stop that kid from taking the drugs because, again, you're not around. See, the only thing that would stop them is if they go into their mind and think, wait a minute, this is wrong based off of a standard that's above me and my friends. See? So if they think about you, if they think about God, then they're going to think, okay, I'm not going to do this. People in the world say this is foolishness, right? Which is why people in the world, they do whatever they want to do. These people in Israel thought this was foolishness. That's why they made 2 golden calves. Remember, we looked at this like a month or so ago with Jeroboam, and they were worshiping any other way. The problem, here's how you help your young people to see this from a biblical standpoint. The problem with doing that is it deteriorated the entire nation just by breaking that one rule. See, and just by breaking that one instance of being with your friends, it can put you on a path that will disrupt your entire life. Young people don't realize the significance of one decision like that, do they? No. So if you can show them here, see, and you can read this chapter 15 and say, look how in verse 3, when this young man became king, he did the same sin his dad did, and look where that left his reign. See, that's how you show your children cause and effect. Then you say, look, when you out with your friends, and they may say, just try it one time. What's the big deal? What's the big deal of just making one idol once? It's not a big deal. See my point? What you're doing is you're using the Bible to help double down and build on disciplinary actions and practices in your home. But how many people parent like that? Not that many. And I'm talking about Christians. How many Christians use actual Bible studies to parent and support disciplinary action? First, the parents got to come to Bible study and worship in order, right? So see what we're saying? But then we throw our hands up in arms and say, what? The kids are all over the place. So the same way it repeats itself in the home, it repeats itself in society, it could repeat itself in church. This is what we're looking at. That's why I was saying at the beginning of class, I really encourage you to read or audio listen to these 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles chapters for the next several weeks. We'll probably be all the way into September because there's a wealth of knowledge there, right? Okay, with that being said, as a spoiler, right, from verse 3, we already know where Abijah's reign is going to go, right? This is just bad because we said if you break the first, the rest are going to break. Some things that a young person do, if they do it once, it's going to disrupt them, right? And that's why I mentioned drugs. Now, there's a lot of addictive behaviors. The problem with drugs and alcohol is it takes a hold of you a little bit different, right? Remember, Paul told the church in Corinth, there's some sins you can do outside the body and there's some sins you can do to your body, right? And those are the things that you got to be mindful of because some things you do to your body, you can't take back, right? That's just how it is. There's plenty of examples that you as a parent can show your kids just by a couple quick Google searches of famous people who just tried one addictive substance one time. I'm not talking about a lot of time. Literally just tried it once and are dead and buried 6 feet under. Just one time, right? One time driving without your seatbelt, you can die. Just once, right? Not like these things. So there's things that we need to understand. And when you start looking at it that way, then you start talking about worship, because people will always try to pull you away, right? The young people will try to pull their friends away by saying, hey, God not going to be upset if you miss church one time. Every language they say that sentence, right? So again, trying to make the child understand that in that example in the moment may be difficult unless we've already talked about the dangers of doing something one time in the home multiple times, right? Like certain types of substance abuse, like driving without a seatbelt. These are things we want them to be mindful of, but we got to teach them, right? We don't want them to drive without a seatbelt. These are just things, and here's a way where you can implement that. Because this young man had a choice. He could have been a different king. He chose to choose the easy way. Instead of getting the people back to worshiping the right way, verse 3 says he kept doing the same exact thing that was already in place. That's a follower, not a leader. You got to raise your kids to say, if everybody was walking this way, and you know that the right way was the opposite direction, even if you had to walk through the crowd, you would keep going the right way instead of saying everyone already going this way, so let me walk that way with them. See? But I got to get my child to that deductive reasoning. I have to get their mind there by other examples and some foundational teaching. Kids not just going to wake up one day with all the wisdom and knowledge that you have and start making life decisions like you would have them to make unless you instill it in them. See, we got to take it from out here and put it inside here. This is just one way to do that, to show how this young man, Abijah, had a choice. Did nobody make him worship this way wrong? He's king. Anyone would listen to him, correct? He could have said, listen, I went back and read Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and I have to admit, even my dad was wrong. We got to do the right thing here, right? We're the descendants of David. We're not like the Jeroboam people. We are on this side. And people would have said, wow, you're right. Man, we've been doing this the wrong way. But he chose not to do that. That's why right is always right, even if nobody believes it. It's still right. See what I'm saying? That's what we want young people to realize. The right thing to do is always the right thing to do, even if no one does it. It doesn't make it false because no one does it. That's what we see here as we keep reading, that thanks be to God. This question 2, why did God not remove him from the throne? Because he made a promise, look at verse 4, to David, and in the future, that's why I was saying I wanted to go to the 2nd Chronicles reading. We see that there is some progress made with Abijah, and therefore we see this balance in this transition. So one person's falter, someone else does something and looks at it differently and gets the people back. Okay. And again, that's why I said, if you look at these two, obviously you don't want to leave anybody, but especially young people with just the woe is me, right? We don't want to leave them down here. We want to build them up emotionally. We show them both Abijah and Abijah, right? We see what not to do and what to do. And then we let them make the decision. Okay, when you are in a situation like that and you have to be the leader, will you lead and be uncomfortable, or will you follow and be comfortable? Because following is very comfortable. That's why you have to tell young people that up front. See, because if you don't tell them that, once they start following, they're going to say, this is comfortable. How come my mom made it seem like, or my dad made it seem like it was another way? It's no different than going to the gym or working out. If you don't feel any pain after working out, let me help you. Most likely you were wasting your time because Burning fat and gaining muscle come from physical pain. See? So therefore, if I don't keep lifting the weight like this enough, the next day I say, what? I feel great. Well, then you either need to do more reps or increase your weight. Well, no, that's going to make my arms hurt. Well, sweetheart, that's the pathway, right? Like through the pain is the pathway to get in shape. If we can apply that to decision making, this world would look so different from young people to older people. But people make poor decisions vastly because it's comfortable. See, it's uncomfortable to stand out. That's why I said this section here, you can look. Okay, Sister Stanley, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting because when you think about, well, there's so many things, multifaceted. You think about parenting a child, we want to parent a child to the laws of the land, right? We say, don't speed, don't steal. And usually when we're saying don't steal, it's not because of God's law, right? Or the 10 Commandments. We're parenting to the laws of the land because we know if you do these things, if you steal, if you murder, all these things, we know that it can land you in prison. You can ruin your life. You may be killed on the spot. We parent to the law of the land as Christians. We don't parent as much to the law of God as Christians, which is what we should be doing. And I think it's partly because we don't hear as we're parenting and raising up our children. And again, it depends on when you, as a parent, came to Christ and what you heard in your early teachings while you were raising your children. We don't parent the same way with the laws of God. We don't say, if you kill, if you steal, if you murder, if you, don't love your neighbor, if you don't love God with all your heart, here are the ramifications. We don't do that. We do just the opposite of that. And God has the ramifications of not following God's law is lasting. It's a matter of life and death. We look at the laws of the land and say, oh, because we could see it physically and it's happening in the here and now, we think that is more important, or that's what we focus on. And it really would be nice if we had the opportunity to raise children really thinking about, as you said, how many people parent this way. I think people don't know how to parent this way. Right. And when you think about it and you see it, it's like, wow, this is too late. When you think about the sins that were committed, not following God, and you think about Abijah and what he did, he knew his father was David, right? David did what God asked him to do. He made a mistake. God recognized the mistake that he made. David recognized the mistake. That wasn't enough foundation for them. It's almost like today when you raise children and they have there's a new thing, right? There's a new thing called the internet. There's a new thing called Google. There's a new thing called the blogs. There's a new thing called Instagram. All that advice that's filtered in. And of course, there's a new thing called your friends. You let that infiltrate you to go against what your lineage is, right? When it aligns with the word of God. And it's hard to get people to understand that. We talk about integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking, right? So those things that I have taught you to do, those things that I have trained you, those things that I have begged you, going to college, Ellis, don't do this, Ellis, stay away from this, here's what's going to happen, right? Made you promise about drugs and all those things, right? Those are real things, right? Those are things that as a parent, knowing the effects of those things, right? Saying them to you, asking you, don't do it, right? Here are the things that can happen from that. We don't use the same diligence. So when you talk about integrity, am I doing the right thing when no one is listening? Because I am a Christian, right? Reminding you, you're a Christian, you're set apart, right? God has different plans for you. And when you mess up along the way, just like this king, because of David, the parent, and those prayers, he still has to now go back, intervene, step in, and not destroy. If we could get people, young and old, to realize this, we would be so much better off as Christians. It's a tough journey, but when you know what you know, then you know this. You know this, and this is what we should be practicing as Christians, not as those that are just, running amok as if they don't know God.
In the world. Yeah, this is why, like I mentioned this from a family standpoint, this is why transparency is important as family. And this is not a knock to you, but some people parent or grandparent like this, they have things that are going on in their life and they keep them from the rest of the household, right? I vehemently disagree with that on so many levels, because as a kid, I'm gonna find out anyway. So might as well have told you, correct? Here's why you don't parent that way. Because in verse 4, it says, nevertheless, for David's sake, this is the middle part of what Sister Donna was talking about. The Lord, his God, gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, meaning he still sustained him, right? By setting up his sons after him and by establishing Jerusalem. Why? Verse 5, because David did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and had not turned aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. What does that mean? That means everybody knew about that. Mm-hmm. See? So that meant that the next generation, even though, and we spent during the pandemic a lot of weeks looking at how bad this was. We're not minimizing that, right? Today, we just don't have time to dive in. But the point was, whether it was the nation or his family, everyone can use that as an example, the way these two verses said, and said, even though that thing was the worst of the worst, right? But he did all these other things the way God wanted. So now I can compare, see? But if you don't tell me about Uriah, see what I'm saying? I have, as a young person, I have nothing to compare in my own family, see? Because like certain decisions make sense a little bit better when you give me something from my own DNA, my own last name, right? That's why it's important to say honesty. Hey, I did this. Oh, I didn't know you did that. Mom, dad, grandma, granddad, aunt, uncle. Yeah. And look, this set me back 10 years. Oh, goodness. So you want to be set back 10 years? So this is one section here to look at. Just that little piece. And again, we're drawing out of that to say, oh yeah, you're right. Look at the impact that would make on the grandkids and the great grandkids if you told how bad this thing was and then said, but God's still blessing you, not because of that bad thing, but because of all the good things your grandfather, and when we get to Asa in a second, your great grandfather, and see what we're saying? Like, wow, now you look back and say, wow, even though I'm doing wrong, God's still blessing me because prayers of my parents or my grandparents. Yeah, see, and that's where you start to get this lineage in there. And when you look at these things, as you break these down, and earlier I said Abijah, because Abijah and Abijah, I meant Asa. Asa is the 1 Kings 15, verse 9. That's the one who comes in. He reigns 41 years. His grandmother is Maacah, right? Who we were just talking about. Maacah's son was Abijah. And then Asa, verse 11, we see the transition. This is what I was saying. Don't leave anyone, but especially young people, only in the despair part. Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did his father David. See? So we just see the next generation corrects it. And it says that he banished the perverted persons from the lands. He removed all the idols that his fathers had made. He even removed his grandmother, Maacah, from being queen mother because she had made an obscene image to this God. He cut down her image. He burned it. The only thing he didn't do, verse 14, is remove the high places, right? No one's perfect. But nevertheless, what does it say in verse 14? Asa's heart was what? Loyal to the Lord all his days. See? Balance. This is where households miss. Again, you can do whatever you want. That's the free will. Just like your kid can do whatever they want. Each Christian home can parent and run their house however they want. But it doesn't mean there's not consequences when you do some new way. And don't be upset when the rest of us say that wasn't a good idea. Because we can look at just this chapter to show you why transparency is important. Because transparency helps you see and say, look, told you not to do that. Look at your dad. Look at your granddad. Look at your great granddad. See? And now when we're after Asa, now we got even more examples. We got Abijah and we got Asa. Look what Abijah didn't do. Look what Asa did. Oh, you're right. I'm going to do better. So these are just snapshots, this little snapshot, and we could have applied, I could have used different approaches to application. We don't only have to do application from this chapter for families, right? But this is one way that we can apply this chapter, just looking at it as families. And the older you get, the more you should double down on advice, not the less. It's just some grandparents would think, okay, they grown now. Well, let me help you. The way people grown now is way different than people was grown younger. Some of y'all were literally grown by 12. Some people in this room had a job by 9. Let me help you. These people nowadays be 30 and not grown yet. They 30 and still need someone to help them pay for their cell phone bill. And you think 30? Oh, I was out the house 9. 10, 11, 12. Some of y'all say, oh, I had children by the time my kids still asking me for a Cash App. I didn't even know Cash App. I had to download a Cash App to help my kid out. I was running a household at that time. So please do not let these people nowadays, just because they got facial hair, use deodorant, try to tell you because you grown twice, correct? You know, been there, done that type of thing. So therefore, you got to give more advice the older you get. Because young people now, their mind's somewhere else. I can tell you, trust me, their mind is just ask them basic things. And you'll be like, oh, you thinking like that? You doing that? And think back to you at your age. Again, no one's perfect, but just think back what society had you thinking about in your 20s compared to people today in your 20s. You might be in your 20s thinking, oh, I was thinking about establishing a home. People in their 20s thinking about going on trips and vacation and posting the pictures. See the difference? And you think, man, if you blow all your money on trips and vacation, how you ever gonna have down payment for a house? Already you see the two of you not thinking the same thing, right? Because society is pushing your mind to something else. So does that mean that your advice is not worth it because in your 20s, you were thinking about establishing a home and people are going to say now, well, mom or dad or grandma or granddad, you don't know it's different. Let me tell you something about you don't know talk. Recorded human history, even atheists believe there's only 6,000 years. People been living a certain way for 6,000 years, but all of a sudden something happened just miraculously in the 2000s. People feel like YouTube taught them a whole new way that the other 6,000 years of people, they never knew about. But somehow 6,000 years of people, they was doing okay, right? They was living and breathing and walking and talking, growing old. But people today think they just the first human beings. God just made them today. God started the year 2000 and he just started making people. That's how young people treat advice nowadays. They don't even stop to think, wait a minute, if I lived in this time period with the principles from another time period, maybe I'd be more successful. They don't even think that way, do they? Instead, they tell you wrong. And you think, man, I lived in both time periods. I think I came from another era and I'm still breathing. Am I upright? So which one have more advice? But you see how warped people can be? That would be like you being in David's family, reading these 15 verses we just reread and say, what? Man, I don't care. And you'd be like, that's your own grandfather, great-grandfather, your own father. Man, this don't mean nothing to me. That's how people treat you with your advice. That's why I tell you, you have to give it more. Because as you live, you keep adding to your experience. That's the blessing of living long enough, right? When you're just young, you're just starting out on your experience journey. But life, as we see from this Old Testament, is I got to see what to do and what not to do from some historical references. I have to look back in order to move forward. See, because I just got to my 20s. So I got to look at some people who came before me. And this example, I just became a king. I got to look at some people who was kings before me, right? Therefore, I see how did they do? Because I knew I'm just a king for the first time. And then when we look at, next week we'll look at it, Second Chronicles was talking about when Abijah, he did do this part right, when he was talking to Jeroboam in this battle, because in First Kings it just alludes to it, and we'll stop here. He was talking about, hey, and we read this twice, a couple of months ago and then last month. Hey, you all on the Israelite side did a wrong thing because Rehoboam was really supposed to be king, but you let some people persuade this other guy to be king. And then it says, because Rehoboam was young and indecisive, so you took advantage of him. And see, older people try to tell young people, especially based off their personality, sweetheart, you have a personality where people are going to take advantage of you. But do they listen? Nope. And Rehoboam, his reign was so short. Look, we just have this one little, he came and went. See, that's what we try to tell you. You're gonna come and go. So life just gonna come and go you. And do they listen?
No.
Nope. So these are things that you can show from the Bible. I'm trying to tell you, we all have different personalities. Some people have strong will, some people have weak will. And in this world, people looking to devour just like Satan, like a roaring lion. And if you let people walk all over you, they're gonna walk all over you, come back, see you on the ground, and stomp some more. And that's what Second Chronicles was saying. And even though he said all that was true, as a spoiler alert, Jeroboam said, man, let's attack him anyway. And God had to come save them because people don't listen. But the advice still was true. That's why I'm telling you, there's so much you can grab just from First Kings 15, Second Chronicles chapter 13, just in family structure, especially today. Because today and yesterday is like Mars and Earth. That's how far it is the way young people today think and sadly reason. That's why I started the class talking about deductive reasoning. My fear is the way people reason today. See what I'm saying? Because the mind is powerful enough to shut your whole body down. It could make you sick if your mind say you're sick and your body be like, no, we not. Yes, we are. Okay, we sick now. That's how strong your mind is. So if society starts reasoning poorly, God only knows where human beings will be, right? Because who will be left to make deductive reasoning to see right and wrong and be like, I think we're going to choose the right way. Brother Ricardo, go ahead, and then we'll close here.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is fascinating because there's so much application that can be made from these passages. Like, Asa could have gone the other way too. Right? Yeah. You mentioned, he had things prior to that he looked at. If you looked at those guys, he would have been like, well, I'm gonna be horrible to you. We do the same thing that they did, but he didn't. And that's also why I mentioned the comment I mentioned last week about, even if you see the person next to you or in front of you, behind you, not worshiping, you worship. You worship to the best of your ability because you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know what God has in store. And to look at this from a normal perspective or a perspective where we can look much forward, because we have the whole book, we can see what happened. Because it was through sort of this lineage that Zechariah and Elizabeth came through, right? Because they were the Levites and stuff like that too, and David and all of that, and then finally Jesus. So you have the Asa just had the picture that he had to make a decision, and thankfully he made the best decision, he made the right decision. But look at the amount of kings that went before him and after him that made bad decisions. So I'm saying this to say again, don't look at the person next to you, don't look at your family member, don't look at your mother, don't look at your son. Look at what you're doing and worship and do the best that you can. And when you look at it from a family perspective, it's the same perspective, right? You might want to use fear and you respect. You might want to use love, because love would be the best one, right? Because if they love you in the way that they should, then they will do everything that they need to. But unfortunately, for human beings, we don't love like God. We don't love the way we should. So let's use fear, let's use respect in a way where you can respect me enough to do the things that you need. So you can fear me enough not to do certain things that you shouldn't do. You know what I'm saying? So again, this is fascinating because there's so much application that can be made here. But again, the respect factor, the fear factor, the love factor, if we can love the way we should love, at that point, we should be able to worship the way that we need to worship in order to glorify God.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, again, each one of these, if you don't have a printout, take it home, because the printout makes it just a little bit easier, because the printout gives you two things. It gives you the king's name and the year, so you can see how much time, which king had a longer reign, which king had a shorter reign. And you can look at these things to see which ones do well. Asa does well, Jehoshaphat does well. And we start to see, like Brother Ricardo was saying, before Abijah did bad, before him, we can look at Jeroboam on the other side, Rehoboam on this side, bad. Then we look and see, okay, some started doing bad again, this up and down, up and down. So we see that each king, each generation has their own responsibility to the truth, right? That's basically, if I could sum up with what Brother Ricardo was saying. Right. And if we can instill that on young people, society will be better. Right. You too busy worrying about me and saying I'm wrong as older than you, but you got to live. I'm going to be gone. Know how people say when you talking about parent teacher conference. Right. And, some parents will say, the teacher already got theirs. What does that mean? The teacher is the teacher. So no matter if you like them, don't like them, their style, they already have a degree. So kind of don't matter how you feel, right? You got to get your own in life. See what I'm saying? So that is the part where it is missed on young people. They too busy arguing with you. You, sweetheart, have to have your own heartbreak, your own first car, your own first house, your own interview. You see what I'm like? You telling me I'm wrong, but I've had those things already. So you arguing with me is not going to prevent you from the bad things in this life, because they're coming. That's all you try to tell people. Each king had to make their own decision to choose the right way. Some did the right and some did the wrong. You can't be like, oh, I blame my dad. Every time it tells you, where was the dad? Buried, resting with the fathers. He in the ground. You got to make your own decision. And that is what's lost on society. Better to discuss those things in the home and open up communication to say, listen, you're going to do what you want to do anyway. Let me just tell you what happens when you choose the wrong way. Then you can leave this room upset all you want. Don't slam the door on the way out. But you got to decide when you get confronted with that, which choice you're going to make. And that's all you can do. And I guarantee you, as a younger person, whether they give you the prop for it or not, they will remember that conversation, especially if they make the wrong way. They're going to think that, ooh, man, somebody told me about that. You know how I know that's true? The prodigal son was like that. He woke up with the pigs and thought, wait a minute, I'm out here with pigs. I got to go back. The knowledge, the wisdom, the advice it's somewhere in here, right? We wish it was here at the forefront, but usually when they do bad, it bubbles up to the top and they remember. But if we never put it in, they have nothing to draw from to remind them. Okay, Sister Karen, and then we'll really close after that. Go ahead. No, it's okay. We went over a little longer. It's all right.
Remember we were talking about, what the fathers did, this is what the fathers did, all of that. We have to be careful what to do as just people in general, because history of a way of repeating itself.
Yep.
I don't know how, I don't know why, but as a parent, I've seen it. Like, I've seen my kids make decisions that they did not even know that I made. And they made the same
exact one. Yep.
The same exact
Yep.
one. I see, I've said this all the time. Sharikil, my youngest daughter, is just like my sister, my rebellious sister. And my sister was not in her life. So there's no way she could have seen what my sister did. And there's no way she could have known what my sister did because she didn't exist. And then all of a sudden, she becomes my sister. And I'm looking at it like, how is this possible? Because children are supposed to be a product of their environment, right? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, sometimes
so
the
we have to
DNA.
be so careful. It's the DNA. And I honestly, I'm trying to study to figure out how does this even work? Because I'm watching it happen. So when you said it's good to let your children know what you did, the history of what you did, so that they don't make the same mistakes. I'm telling you, it is so true, because I'm watching it happen and I'm like, how, it's just baffling. It's mind blowing. How on earth did this happen? So to say that, we have to be careful every single thing that we do.
Yep.
You know that we always talk about, you're alive today only because grandma prayed for you, right? You've heard that. The only reason you're alive today, the only reason you're so because grandma prayed for you, not you, not your mother, but grandma prayed for you. So these things carry a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And based on this story, you see what happened in the story. And as Ricardo said, he saw so many things after him, before him, whatever, and he still made that choice. So we have to be just so careful. And it's hard, because even though the flip side of it is, even if we're careful, but it is, and it starts from birth.
Yep.
Right? Naomi came out knowing exactly how she's gonna rule.
Already have personality.
With her own personality.
Yeah,
And
already,
we still
yep.
don't know what happened.
Yep,
But
already.
you guys have heard me say this though, that Naomi's Crystal. But to say Crystal is not like that anymore. But she didn't know that her daughter was gonna come out just like her. And that's why parents will always say, I can't wait for you to have your own child,
Then you
just
can
like you. It happened. Crystal had a child just like her. And now she's not like that anymore. So in her head, I remember Ricardo always asked how, why, how? It was Crystal, but guess what, Ricardo? You didn't know that Crystal.
Didn't know
They
it.
didn't meet her because she was a child, right?
Yep.
So what I'm saying is that it's so uncanny how it works, the whole repetition of everything, and there's nothing new under the sun. Everything, it's happened before, it's gonna keep on happening, and our children are gonna suffer sometimes because of things that we did.
Yep.
And thank God for his grace and his mercy and all of that, because God may not kill you, but God will allow you to watch this all happen, and you're suffering silently, crying every night, all depressed and everything. And you may not die, you may end up making it to heaven, yes, but you're going to be really sad just watching the things that you probably could have fixed,
Preventative, yeah. That's why we're talking, this is preventative care. We want to look at these things no matter what stage your household is in, from single all the way to grandparents. This is preventative. So apply these things. Thank you for everyone's comments, your attention. Those of you who are online visiting with us right now, or our church members, we're going to transition into our worship service. So we're thankful for that. So the brothers in the back, we can disconnect our live stream for Bible study, and then we'll switch over to our worship service link. And then for